And I love small towns. I'm a small town person. I like seeing familiar faces at the grocery store. I love just knowing who my neighbors are. And we're going to have this space today in a manner, I hope, that reminds us all that we are neighbors. We are community members in a small town. I know things are really heated and charged right now everywhere. I'm actually sweating up here talking in front of all of you. Not just because I'm nervous about that, but just because it feels sometimes really scary these days to do anything, to say anything, to be in a place like this. And I know I'm not the only person that feels that way, so bear with me if my voice shakes a little bit. Before I get started, I just want to thank an incredible team of volunteers and people who helped us put this together. Peyton on tech. Indiana will be running around the room helping us with microphones and questions. She's in the back. And then we have some incredible panelists and a moderator who I'll introduce in 1 second. But before that, I also wanted to acknowledge and welcome Representative Sarah Vance. Thank you so much for being here today. Yes. Great. And if you'd like to say a few words at the beginning, let me know. I can pass the mic to you. Okay, so I think I just also want to say why this, why now, what we're doing here. We're here today to talk about the First Amendment and the separation of church and state. And Peyton's going to roll some slides because I will be honest with you, I had to do a refresher myself on what the First Amendment is. You hear it thrown around all the time. And I had to just actually do a little reading myself on what this is, the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. And so we'll scroll through some slides. I am not going to read them to you, but it's a pretty short and simple piece of guiding law, a piece of a core foundation of our democracy. And so the reason we're doing this right now, I think, is because it's been in our local news and in our local community hot topic lately. We did have one of our journalists on the panel, unfortunately isn't able to make it today. But we've got Michael Armstrong here who can also help us talk from his experience in the press on this issue. So that's why the topic, why now? But I also wanted to take this time to introduce a group that I decided to be a volunteer board member on. I thought I was going to be doing paperwork, but instead I am up here sweating with a microphone. But a few months ago, at the end of the last legislative session, some friends, some neighbors, and some people I had met for the first time got together, and we were just sharing frustration on how divisive and polarized our community seems to keep being and becoming more and more. We were frustrated by the fact that we had felt our voices weren't heard and represented by all of our elected officials. We were frustrated that sometimes we couldn't get a response or we felt unwelcome when we went to Juneau. So we decided to get together and create a new organization called the House District 6 Accountability Project. We are not here to name or shame or say anything bad about any of our elected officials. What we did come together to do was to advocate for our local community, for the things that matter to us that help create a healthy, thriving place for our families, for our children, for our grandchildren, for our elders, for our small and large business owners, for our workers, our people who work so many jobs to be able to live in this incredible community place. So I don't know, we're just started. We're so new. We don't have a live website. We have a Facebook page that we started to create and then got scared to put up, but we're going to do it soon so you can find out more about us. But really what we want to do is come together and work for solutions. So we are the host of this project, of this event. And I am really grateful because we asked an incredible person to be a moderator and some incredible local folks to be panelists for us. And I'm going to introduce Jason. Some of you may know Jason as a city council member, or maybe as an incredible winemaker and owner of Sweet Gale's Meadworks and Cidery. Or you may know, but you may not know that he grew up in Soldotna and Kasilof, and he was a beekeeper when he was a high school student. And he was also a diplomat and worked overseas for over 20 years for the US government. So I'm really grateful that you're going to help us moderate this panel today, Jason. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Carly. Yeah. So yeah, the first couple of times that they came to ask me if I wanted to moderate, I said, "Ooh, it's not something I've ever done before, but if you can't find anyone who has experience, maybe I'll consider it." Apparently, they weren't able to find anybody, so here I am. So first thing on my agenda here is to run through the ground rules for how we're going to organize this and how we're going to ask the questions. The rule number one is please be respectful in all your questions or comments. We may disagree with each other, but we can disagree civilly and respectfully. We're all neighbors. We share a common love of this place. I think sometimes we get wound up thinking and feeling like the other side is trying to wreck things or wreck the country or wreck the state. But in our hearts, we know that's not true. Everyone is trying to make Homer and Alaska and the United States and the world a better place. We just have different values that we prioritize in how we figure out how to do that in our own mind. Number two is we're going to be taking questions and comments through a random ticket selection process. So some of you who knew that you wanted to ask a question or make a comment may have already taken a ticket. But if you find yourself feeling like you have something to say, just raise your hand and someone will come to you with a ticket, and you'll keep half the ticket and the other half they'll put into a bucket. And then when the panelists have finished answering the questions that are pre-cooked for them, then we will draw from that bucket, and the person whose number is drawn will stand up and get a microphone and they can ask their question. I'm going to tweak that just a little bit. That's the main plan that we're doing. But I know that there are some what I would maybe call subject matter experts in the audience who may have something very specific to offer beyond just the opinion of one of our citizens. And so if you're in that category, especially if you're a practicing journalist, originally we had someone like that at the table, but that person was not able to make it. We'd be very interested in your opinion. Also, if you're a minister, we have one minister, but if there's other ministers from other faith traditions in the audience, just raise your hand and you can just get the mic and talk. You won't have to go through the system that we'll be using. So then the final thing is if there's someone who has a question they want to ask but doesn't feel comfortable talking, there is a bucket at the back where you can write your question on a card and put it in there, and we can pull from. That's the green bucket, the green Halloween bucket. So we can pull from that as well. I think in general it's nice if people can stand up and talk, but if there's someone who has a good question who'd rather not, we do have that. And then if you're on Zoom, we will take questions from the chat. I'm not sure how that will work, but I will occasionally ask if there's any hands raised on Zoom, and then hopefully that will come out into the audience there. All right. So next I'd like to introduce our panelists. Starting from, I guess we'll go left to right. On your far left, we have Reverend Blake Langston. Blake is a recent addition to the Homer community. He hails from Arkansas. He's an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church. He's served in a variety of ministry contexts, spanning 22 years. He's been at churches ranging from 50 members to over 2,000 in attendance. He's also he has been executive director of the Wesley Foundation at the University of Central Arkansas, and he's currently pastor of Homer United Methodist Church. Prior to his career in ministry, Reverend Langston served on the campaigns and staff of Republican U.S. Congressman Jay Dick and Democratic U.S. Senator David Pryor, both from Arkansas. Reverend Langston is a graduate of Vanderbilt University in Nashville. He has a BS in biochemistry, BAs in both history and political science, and a Master of Divinity and an MA in counseling from Asbury Theological Seminary in Wilmore, Kentucky. Next, we have Marcia Kuzmal, who serves on the Homer Library Advisory Board and the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and she is also a member of the United Methodist Church Civic Engagement Group. Her professional career includes marketing and communications leadership in both for-profit and nonprofit enterprises, including the American Library Association, Microsoft, and World Vision, a faith-based global relief and development charity. She was a stringer. I did not know this until this event, but she was a stringer for the Homer News in the mid-1980s. and has been a full-time Homer resident and small business owner here since 2015. She has a bachelor's degree in journalism from Baylor and master's degrees from the University of Washington Information School, as well as Northwestern Kellogg. Finally, we have someone who most people in Homer probably know, Michael Armstrong. Michael was raised in Florida and moved to Anchorage in 1979. He's lived in Homer since 1994. He graduated with a BA from the New College of Florida and an MFA in writing from the University of Alaska Anchorage. He retired in 2022 after working at the Homer News for 23 years as an editorial assistant, reporter, and editor. He has published 5 novels and numerous short stories, including After the Zap, Agvik, and Truck Stop Earth. In 1993, he had the, I guess, dubious honor of making the annual banned books list when Cold Shocks, an anthology that published one of his stories, was challenged by a father who objected to the book being placed in the young adult section of the Montclair, New Jersey Public Library. So there's the introductions. And now we're going to move into a few questions that these panelists are going to answer. The first one is to Michael, and it is, what are the implications for journalism, especially local journalism in small communities, when voices are silenced?
One of the challenges across the country.
I'm not sure your mic is on.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So there it is. I'll look for the red dot. One of the challenges all across the country, particularly in small towns, is what we call news deserts, where you've had often weekly papers, published, sometimes going back decades, even centuries, and the newspaper goes away. What you lose with that is not just the breaking news, the exciting news, but just the daily in and out of covering that community, city council, police reports, fire reports, but also, bake sales for people who lost their homes, the ferry schedule, the sports coverage of, a little small town football team, all of that. So when you lose that voice, you lose, I think, what is a connection to the community. So we can talk about the silencing of voices in terms of big stories, controversial stories, but also I think as great a danger is the silencing of all those community connections.
Thank you, Michael. And in general, I'm going to be asking if there's any other journalists in the room who want to comment, but the next question is so closely related that maybe I'll go into that one, and then we'll check in to see if there's anybody else who might want to address that question from a different perspective. The next question, Michael, is what, if any, do you think the role of a sitting legislator is in influencing what a newspaper publishes?
When I worked with legislators over my career, those legislators, as part of their job, was communicating, checking in with the community. So obviously we'd have town halls, and I would go and cover that. The legislature. Two things. I mean, I want to expand that from just not influencing, but informing. Informing is influencing in the sense of if there are issues that are going on in Juneau, things that are happening that we may not be aware of because we're not in Juneau. We're not in the day-to-day, working with the legislature. It's important for a legislator to keep us informed and, in that sense, influence. If there's an issue that he or she sees, they want community support for that, want community input on that. The politicians, I mean, people in general want to influence the news in the sense that they want their perspective, their their institution to get coverage. I was constantly getting press releases from South Peninsula Hospital, for example, Dorotha Ferraro. I don't know if Dorotha's here, but Dorotha was one of those, we call them FLACs, but public information officers, people I had a great relationship with. And every week I would get a press release, hey, we have a new doctor. Hey, we're going to have, the health fair. By the way, the health fair is coming up. We have this, new miracle medical device. So people, in day to day, people who represent institutions, work with institutions, are trying to get their perspective in the paper, and lots of times it's an easy ask. It's like, yes, of course, I wanted to let people know about the health fair. Legislatures, I think, as part of their job is to, particularly if they represent a certain perspective, and I don't necessarily mean a partisan perspective, but for example, Paul Seaton, had very strong feelings about vitamin D. He felt that this was there's a vitamin D deficiency, particularly in northern climates. This is a supplement we should take. So Paul, I would say is a health advocate. So the people who have backgrounds, perspectives as part of their legislative careers, where they're coming from. Fishing is an obvious one.
Michael.
Yeah.
I didn't mention it, but we have a 3-minute time limit, and you've reached your limit.
Yeah. Okay.
You can wind up.
But yeah, just in general, there is a role to influence. I think the question is, how is that influence done? And we can talk about that later.
Thank you. And now I'd like to open up if there's anyone else who's a journalist or a political figure who might have an interest in saying anything on this topic. Before we move on, just raise your hand and we can get you a mic. And just please identify yourself and your role.
Hi, Shauna.
Sorry, I was eating. My name is Shauna Loshbau. I used to be a journalist. My husband also was a journalist. We worked for both the Homer News and the Peninsula Clarion. And over those years, we had some unusual experiences. And it seemed like the second question was really quite to the point about what sort of influence legislators might have. And so I just wanted to say there was an incident, and I'm not going to name a name, and it's, old, way long gone. But when my husband was hired by the Peninsula Clarion, a legislator from the Peninsula sent a note to the editor asking that they not hire him because he had environmental sympathies. And the editor at the time told the legislator that that was not appropriate, and they went ahead and hired him. And our editor did not tell us that until he retired from the paper. So
interesting.
But that is something that really happened. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. So for Michael again, silencing journalists isn't just a local issue or even a national one. What organizations can we count on to support a free and independent press? Or what can we do ourselves to support a free and independent press? And you'll have 3 minutes, and a yellow card will go up at 2.5 minutes if you want to occasionally glance in that direction. Thank you.
Thanks. So in Alaska, we have the Alaska Press Club, which is, I think, one of the best statewide organizations supporting journalists. Every spring, there would be an annual meeting of that, workshops, presentations, a lot of networking, and they give out awards. But that's the state advocacy organization for journalism, and it brings in everybody. I mean, it brings in blogs, it brings in podcasts. It's all media. Nationally, there's the Society for Professional Journalists, which also advocates for journalism. They have a code of ethics, which if you go into any newsroom, you'll see that printed out on the wall. So that's another organization that advocates for journalists. The American Civil Liberties Union often will fight for journalists' rights. They've done things like student journalists in high school who have been suppressed. They've gone to court and upheld their right to publish. But locally, I think the best thing you can do to support journalism is just, support public radio. KBBI is one news source. Or commercial radio sources. Anybody who produces news, gets out on the street reporting it, deserves your support by at least listening. If you hear their commercial and you hear an advertiser, you see advertisements, say, hey, thank you for supporting this paper, this media. And also, read the papers. I mean, if you can't afford a subscription, go to the library and read it. Be involved with what is being reported in your community, and support it by subscriptions, by advertising, and by buying the paper. We've had a decline in readership, unfortunately, changing media, and that's something that every print newspaper has confronted, has to deal with, and that's a challenge. But as new media develops, I would say seek those out and support those as well.
Thank you. And this next question is the last one. That's just for Michael. All of you are welcome to comment on any of them, of course, just show me. This is a two-part question, Michael. In your opinion, was writing to the publishers of the Homer News on official legislator letterhead a violation of the First Amendment? And then the second part would be, would your answer have been different if Representative Vance had written the letter without the official letterhead?
I support a wide latitude of the First Amendment, and I would say, Representative Vance did have a First Amendment right to express her opinions. Honored letterhead or not honored letterhead, she had a right to write the publishers of the Homer News to object to Chloe's article. And I mean, Alaska law is interesting. A sitting legislature during legislative session, they can say a lot. I mean, it's in the Constitution. They could say a lot without many limitations, which I think is as it should be. A legislature should be free to speak on the floor. The question is, and I think I guess I can address this, does a legislator have, in the context of that, should they intimidate the press, or should they make veiled threats? And I don't think they should do that. And I think that's what's happened. And this is why we're here now. There are some limitations there and some accountability.
Thanks, Michael. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add, a different perspective? Thanks. And if you're just if you're an audience member, you can ask for a red ticket. And if you're a subject matter expert or a journalist or someone along those lines, just raise your hand and someone will bring you a mic. So is that for a mic or a ticket? A mic, okay.
Okay.
You'll have 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Nona Safra. I went to the Temple University Annenberg School of Broadcasting, and I was a journalist in Philadelphia. I worked at a 50,000-watt radio station. My take on this is the story is much bigger than Homer, because I've had calls from former news directors that I worked for former television directors that I've worked for, because they feel, having read the media coverage that we have had, that there is a distinct violation. So whatever we're thinking, this story is not going away right now. and there is tremendous interest in it. They want to know what's going to happen at this meeting and what will happen in Homer, what will happen on the Kenai Peninsula, and are we the little town that is going to, go national with this? So I will tell you, one of them is an Emmy award-winning news producer from Morning News that has called to find out. So folks, it might seem little, but it really is huge.
Thank you, Nona. Appreciate that. And there's one more person up here who had it. Okay, great. So the next question, unless there's anyone else in the audience that wants to talk. Okay, the next question is for Marcia. Marcia, you were on the board, the library board in 2022 and 23 when there was an attempt to ban books from the Homer Library. What was it like to respond to that attempt to ban books? And can you describe the outcome of that effort and how it played out?
Sure. Many of you were probably here when this happened, but the library was asked to remove 55 books from the children's section. The outcome was very positive in all aspects. It was a very healthy and a very good exercise for the community to go through. We were very fortunate in that our library was well prepared to address the complaints, in that we have a very strong collection development policy that's in place that details how our books were selected. And we had a very strong reconsideration process in place, which included the library board as being the kind of the deciders in terms of whether the books would stay on the shelf or not. There was a process of making a complaint to the library director responding, then the complaint can be appealed to the library board. And then the library board members literally read every single one of the 55 books that were being challenged. We had 2 public hearings during the library advisory board meetings where members of the public could come. One of them went from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So it was very, lots of folks were interested. So we were able to listen to everyone. We were able to read the books. And then we voted on each book title individually in a public meeting. And we did not vote to remove any one title. So there's a long history of, the library board policies were not just made up on their own. The library profession has a long history of having guidelines and professional ethics. One of them from 1939 is the Library Bill of Rights that states that all the libraries serve all people of the community, that books and other materials are not selected by political doctrine or personal disapprovals by any one group. So there's long history, lots of deliberations that have gone on in protecting libraries and the book choices that are made.
Thank you. Anybody, any other experts on book bannings that might want to speak up? Probably not. Thank you. So Marcia, next question, and I think the last one that's just for you. What current trends are you aware of with regards to book challenges, and what can people like us do to respond to calls for banning books if we disapprove of that?
So book challenges have increased dramatically in the last 3 years, quite a spike. The data that's collected each year on what is the nature of book bans, what books are being banned, all of that is available online from organizations like the American Library Association. About 72%, and I've got some of that data here, about 72% of book bans are coming from pressure groups or from boards or elected officials who are being influenced by those groups. Interestingly, only 16% of the bans are coming from parents. So it is definitely more of an organized effort than an individual effort by individual people. Mostly it's books that are, you can probably name them, and over the history of time, it's gone from, racial issues to sexual issues. Now it's about LGBTQ plus issues. So whatever the current topic is that people are focused on, that's what is the nature of the book bans. I would say one change that we made at our library is that we did, prior to the book ban challenge, we didn't ask people to verify that they had actually read the material. So now on our challenge form that's posted online, if you have an objection to a book or a program, you need to be specific about what is it about that book, where in the book, and need to know too that even if there's a single passage, for example, that someone pulls out, it has to be taken in the context of the entire book. So we can all find things in the Bible and Shakespeare that's like, oh my gosh, but you have to take the book in its entirety. So the things that I think are important for people to do is know that your library has a policy and has a strong policy and has a strong procedure for how to address challenges to materials or to programs, because that's critical to be in place. I think you can also just have an awareness of what's going on and stay informed about, and you may have seen something like in the news where a librarian in Oklahoma was just awarded $700,000 because she had been fired because of not taking a book off the shelf. So these things are being litigated.
Thank you. So this next question is for anyone on the panel. Just show me with your hand whether you're interested in addressing it. The question is, what do we lose as a community if the books we can get at the library or the news we can read in the local paper is being censored? Michael?
When news is censored by either, well, government can't do it. That's what the First Amendment is all about, but the government can try to do it. And interestingly, although the government cannot censor and cannot say to a newspaper, you can't do this, you can't publish this, often government just doesn't release the news or makes it hard to get. So in that sense, there is some censorship. But if what you lose is, first of all, the information that we as citizens need to understand what's going on in our community, understand what's happening in our community, good, bad. But when you have censorship, particularly when people are compliant with it, you lose trust in your news source. You lose the people who are reporting the news. You don't know if they're reporting all the news. You don't know if they're reporting their news accurately. You don't know if they're doing journalism or propaganda. I will qualify that by saying that it's the duty of a journalist to seek out as many opinions, ideas, facts as possible. The Bible here of journalists, the Associated Press style book, distinctly says seek out diversity of voices. When I was on the newspaper, I saw myself as a storyteller, and my job was to tell the stories of all the people of Homer. So, but if you censor that, you lose trust, and you lose voices.
Marcia?
I would say you also lose your right to form your own opinions. And that's a key thing about the notion of freedom to read and the right to know. I mean, those are two concepts that I think are really important, that everyone has the freedom to explore any topic, anything from any perspective, and come to their own conclusions. And right to know, we have a right to know things that we are supporting as taxpayers, things that are being done on our behalf. And if we don't have the right to know, and the right to know is the basis of things like the Freedom of Information Acts that many states have passed. It's the basis of being able to petition the government to get information, but we shouldn't have to pull it out of them. It should be freely available because that's the basis of our government.
Thanks. Blake? Oh, we get to hear your voice finally.
Hi. Yeah.
The next 4 questions are basically for you.
Okay. Man. I think the one of the things that we lose is censorship. Of course, censorship becomes a pendulum, right? Because who censors something now, someone else censors something later. It becomes this very precarious ledge upon which we perch. And so it leads to more and more and more censorship. And so I see it funneling down. So we lose this beautiful thing that we call the celebration of our plurality and our diversity in our communities. So I don't get to hear the voices or read the hard books. I don't get to see the things that would allow me to shape an opinion and then have a really great conversation with someone who may have read something different, who has a completely different opinion that allows me to build trust in my neighbor or build trust in someone. I mean, which is, having recently moved from Arkansas, that's kind of the foundation of some of this for me and my family. And so I see when we censor, all of a sudden we're worried about what it is we can and can't read, what it is we can and can't say. And we don't get to be our truest person in front of the other. And so we lose our ability to be these amazing things that we are and shape these amazing communities that we can.
Thanks. That was good. I shouldn't pass judgment, I guess, as the moderator, but thank you. Thank you. Any experts out there on this one, or can we move on to separation of church and state? All right. So the next 4 questions, and then will be on separation of church and state. And just a reminder that at that point, we will move on, liven things up with questions and comments from the audience. But if you'd like to make a question, just raise your hand at any time during this, and someone will bring you a ticket that you can put into the bucket. So the first question is for Blake. Something that we've been hearing a lot about lately in the news and elsewhere is Christian nationalism. Can you tell us what that is from your perspective?
So from my perspective, a Christian nationalism is essentially, and broadly and generally speaking, again, being able to observe without judgment, is the idea that a national identity and a religious identity would be fused. So there's a fusion, and specifically in this, because it's in the name of Christian nationalism, would be that Christian values and national values would be fused. This is not the informing of one of the other, which is, by the way, the right of every person who expresses any sort of faith or religion, or those who express no faith or religion whatsoever. And so Christian nationalism is specifically that fusing of values and the fusing of mechanics, the mechanical operations between faith, specifically Christianity in this instance, and a national identity. So merging those two things into one thing.
Thank you. Any other panelists want to take that one on, or should we move on to the next question, or Marcia?
I would say with that, there's the expectation that to be a true American, I mean, when they are fused, to be a true American, the expectation is that you also be a Christian. And so, and vice versa. And to be a Christian, you need to be, and nationalism, I think, is very different from patriotism. And I think most people appreciate the difference. So I think that is something that we've seen evolve. So it's not just I'm an American and I'm a Christian, therefore I must be a Christian nationalist. They're not the same thing.
Any ministers in the audience who might want to, or others, politicians who might want to tackle that one? Okay, next one. Again, for the whole panel, I guess, anyone who wants to address it, but we'll start with Reverend Langston. How do people of faith, with faith and belief in Christian teachings, how can they counter the rise of Christian nationalism?
Okay. Yeah. So can I make a confession? You know, I was taught a long time ago that when you're in public and mixed company, you should never talk about politics or religion, right? It's making the day a little bit tough. So repeat that question for me so that I can.
How do people with faith and belief in Christian teachings counter the rise of Christian nationalism?
Okay, so one, it's understanding that it is not the highest calling. And forgive me for those of you who are not people of faith or Christians. In this case, though, I'm addressing my tribe, is that it is not the highest calling of Jesus to be a good American. That may sound weird. Now, I'll also say this, that one of the ways, and I think the primary way, that we can counter Christian nationalism, which is that fusing, that enmeshment of those identities, remember, is by living out truly those things which Jesus taught most profoundly, which center on loving your neighbor, which center on loving God. I mean, you will notice a recurring theme of love in all those teachings. And as a result, if we are loving people, if we are people of good conscience, if we are people who look after, to quote Jesus, the widows, the orphans, and the poor, then we are going to be, in my mind, the greatest kind of Americans. We are those who will look out for those and speak for those who can't speak for themselves. We'll stand for those who are being told they must sit down. We'll rise for those who've been knocked down. That we'll be the people who would, through our values, live out this great calling and really, in doing so, become fantastic people and citizens of this nation. And so to me, it really is understanding the difference between the two that will allow us then to live out the truest and the core values of what we say as Christian folk. And that really that spans the gamut of Christian denomination. If you're Catholic, if you're Orthodox, if you're Protestant, if you're Coptic, if you're Egyptian, all of the different Christian branches, evangelical or conservative or liberal or progressive, all those things together. The way that we battle this enmeshment is by understanding that they're essentially two different things and then not accepting that they must be one thing in order for either of them to be valid. Does that make sense? Thank you. That's what I've got.
Anybody else on the panel? Marcia, maybe? Anything to add? Nope. Okay. Again, this is for the whole panel. Second to the last question. How do politicians justify basing their political decision-making on their religion when the Constitution they are sworn to uphold clearly calls for the separation of church and state? Anybody? Michael?
First of all, I think we have a long history in America of people of faith serving in government and serving in political action. I mean, Reverend Martin Luther King is a good example. It's a good idea to have people of faith in our government. If you're raised in religion, presumption is that, most religions have the central tenet of doing to others as you would have them do unto you. That's a good moral basis for anybody to serve anywhere, particularly in government. If you're raised in a faith, you learn about respect, tolerance, love, all these things that we've learned in the Bible over the years. So that's good in a politician. And just as good if we have fishermen in our political systems as we have teachers, people from all sorts of walks of life. But if you're informed by your faith, and that's one of the things that helps you be a good person and be a kind person, that's a good thing for a politician to do. On the other hand, the First Amendment says we shall not establish a religion. And that's, where we get into a politician stepping back and trying to understand if by practicing my faith is using my faith to inform my decisions, am I suppressing another religion? And a good example of that is what happened in the Kenai Peninsula boroughs, people of faith, good Christians, good moral, upstanding people felt it was ideal we should have an invocation before our assembly meetings. And they crafted this ordinance that said you could do that, but you have to be a member of essentially a 501c qualifying group on the Kenai Peninsula. That excluded Jewish people because there's not a temple on the Kenai. And in fact, a Jewish woman sued and said this was establishing religion. This was denying me from speaking, from doing an invocation. And the ACLU backed her and they sued and they won. And that's why we have the church's flying spaghetti monster doing invocations. But I think that's the limit is, by practicing your faith, you suppress others' beliefs or even their non-beliefs. And I think that's where that's the separation, that's the wall.
Thanks, Michael. Marsha?
In doing some of the study and research I've been doing on Christian nationalism, one concept that I came across I'd never heard of before was that in the colonies and in the original states, there were state religions, and taxpayer dollars actually went to support these denominations. In New England, it was mostly Congregationalists. In Maryland, it was Catholicism, and there were other, Protestant religions for different states. And some of these practices were in place even into the 1800s. I think Massachusetts was the last state that gave up its state religion. And so when our Constitution was written, that was part of the context of that time, that there were these established state religions. And the folks doing the Constitution decided they didn't want that was not a practice that they wanted to carry forward, that at the federal level, they couldn't control what the states did, but at the federal level, there would be no established religion. At the federal level, there would be no religious requirements for office holders, because some states had requirements that you had to be a professing whatever to run for office. So at the federal level, the decision was made, we're not going to do that. That's not the nature of our democracy. Our democracy is inclusive. So I think those original concepts and that original rejection of making religion be a litmus test of sorts is valid, because it's part of our freedom of conscience, our freedom to accept whatever beliefs we have. And we know those beliefs inform our actions, but it's not something that should be forced on anyone. I mean, we all know that the sacredness of our own conscience is paramount.
Thanks, Blake.
So having worked for a congressman and a senator in Washington, and both of them, one of them was Jay Dickey, was for a while was the chaplain of the House of Representatives, a person of very deep faith. I saw it and grew up with his children. Now there is a very fine line. Now, one thing that as a person of faith that I like to say is that I've never been told that I should not take my conscience or my values into the polling places, into where I vote. And I think there's no broad expectation, there should be no broad expectation that any politician would put that off to the side when they legislate or when they're in the conversations about what will be funded. I think all of that has to play a role in it. And then from the perspective of being a representative democracy, the Democratic Republic, is that for a politician to understand that there are people in their representative districts that are also people of faith, that also have inputs into their offices and their staff, and remind them that they are also kind of representing them. It's not just the politician, but it also is incumbent on the politician to represent the people who voted them into that office. And so that's important. Now, the line comes when the activities become tantamount to a state-sponsored religion, which for us, and I think Marsha alluded to it, there were state-sponsored religions. And for us, it's important not to have that, because it does then become a type of coercion, or where at the minimum it's persuasion, at the most it's coercion, where you must be in order to, and it hasn't been that long. You know, I think John F. Kennedy was our first Catholic president, where that was a huge issue, and that's a Roman Catholic Christian, just a non-Protestant, right? So that was an issue here, not that long ago, and so there is that balance. To represent truly what you believe, I think, is a high calling. To represent those who trusted you with their votes, to represent them is a true and a high calling. And so where you balance that out is in that first part, in the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which is we're not going to respect an establishment of religion or prohibit the free exercise thereof. So feel free to exercise that, is my understanding. And I think it was Madison and Jefferson's understanding as well. And then also that, but we can't allow that then to become the sponsorship of a specific religion by the state.
Thank you, Michael.
Just want to add a historical footnote. Marcia had mentioned that the state religion in the early days of the colonies was the Congregationalist faith, which is the modern incarnation of that is the United Church of Christ. And Barack Obama, when he lived in Chicago, attended the United Church of Christ. So if Congregationalism had remained the state religion, that would have been Barack Obama's church.
Interesting. All right, for the last question, before we move on to the audience, it's labeled as being for Blake, but Marcia has already touched on it a bit, and feel free to say more, and you too, Michael. The question is, why is separation of church and state important for both the church and the state? And then what are the historical and constitutional grounds for the separation of church and state? And how does the Establishment Clause protect individual and collective religious liberty? Kind of a lot there, but whichever part you want to touch on.
That was my question. I wrote it.
Oh, okay. No wonder. Well, then I guess you're ready to answer.
Clock. No, so for me, this is important, and you're going to learn that I'm a huge history nerd here because I'm not going to start in 1776. I'm going to start in 1534, the Act of Supremacy in England, when Henry VIII wanted to get divorced, and he was married to a Catholic lady, and the Catholic Church was a huge influence in Portugal, Spain, and France. Then what did he have to do? Well, he couldn't get it through. He couldn't bribe enough people or pay enough people, so he had to set it up so that he was the head of the church. So the Act of Supremacy was an act passed by Parliament in 1534 that allowed Henry to not only be the King of England, but also the head of the church. Now, it was changed slightly in 1557, 58, because Elizabeth I, who was his second daughter, was a woman and couldn't be head of the church, so she was pronounced supreme governor of the church. But the Acts of Supremacy still set up the idea that in order that the head of the monarchy, the king or the queen, would also be the head of the church. And what that did was it allowed for some extraordinary rule bending and a change. I say this as a Protestant. And Methodists, by the way, are just one step removed from Anglicans, and that's the Anglican Church, the Church of Henry VIII. He got all his divorces, right? And but the Acts of Supremacy set that up. That's the backdrop. So what happened in the meantime, after Henry was Mary came along, she was Catholic. So you have the Reformation, then you have the Counter-Reformation. A lot of murders, a lot of burnings, a lot of persecution occurred in the name of the church on both sides of the argument. And so this is the historical backdrop, which our founding individuals, our founding fathers would have known, and were concerned about, that there would be sectarian divides in a fledgling government that really required the consent of the governed. We the people is the statement that came out of that. We are the first country to have something that does not make an appeal to God is our constitutional founding document. Everything else appealed to God first. Yeah. Big hand claps for Jefferson and Madison and those people who set that up. Is the history of it is this, that the trouble followed when it became state sanctioned. So if you were not that religion, then you were by definition an enemy of the state and a traitor. And so that happened. Oh man, it's about to be yellow card, isn't it? Okay, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. And so we come to that, and then so they set this thing up. Not to respect an establishment of religion was not any kind of indictment on our religious freedoms at all. In fact, it enshrined individual and collective religious freedom by saying that we are not going to impose one thing to the exclusion of all other things. But any of those, and by the way, there was in the Constitutional Congress, there were huge debates that involved religion, and some of them involved like Amish-leaning folks from Lancaster County in Pennsylvania. Oh, it's a red card. So I'm going to leave it there. But we leaned into that. The Supreme Court jurisprudence has backed it up. And it is important for us because it helps to enshrine individual liberty and religious freedom.
It's like, I bet we'll get a question from the audience that will let you finish. So just save your notes, no, your mental notes. Marcia.
I was just going to say, we have an example of that in our own community with the Old Believers, right? So origin of the Old Believers, they disagreed with reforms in the church in Russia. The Tsar was head of the church. So they were political dissidents as well as religious dissidents. And centuries later, they end up at the end of the road here in Homer, Alaska. So that is very comparable.
Michael?
A little student of history too, and well, I have my Scottish flag on my water bottle. So Armstrongs come from the Scottish borders, and when King James, with the Union of Crowns, he kind of kicked the Armstrongs out of Scotland and Northern Ireland. The borderers were Presbyterians. That was the faith they embraced for a lot of reasons. Settled in Northern Ireland in Ulster and became the Ulster Scots. And over time, they originally were tolerated because they helped pacify the native Irish. And also the Anglican Church, the English landlords in Ulster needed people to work the plantations there, settle it and so forth. But over time, the Presbyterians were on the outs, and they were told, well, your marriages, because you're married in the Presbyterian Church, they're not valid. You can't serve in the militia. You can't hold political office because you're the wrong kind of Protestant. I mean, this is not even like you're not Catholic. You're just the wrong kind of Protestant. And so the Scotch Irish, to escape that oppression, like so many other people, came to the Americas. And there's a strong history of the Scotch Irish in Appalachia, Pennsylvania, settling. And they didn't forget. And so when the revolution came around, they were part of that. But that perspective that people who came to the Americas with their faith and being oppressed, I think it certainly had resonance in the creation of our country, that we can't suppress a faith.
Thank you. So now we're going to go over to questions from the audience. I will call out a ticket number. If it's your number, raise your hand and someone will come to give you a mic. If your question or comment has already been addressed, feel free to call out pass, and we'll move on to the next one. And also, we'll give you maybe 5 or 10 seconds to respond, to find your number, and then we'll just move on to the next one. So the first one is 007. If your card ends in ticket ends, if it ends in 007, you get to talk.
Thank you so much. Reverend Langston was your name? So it seems like it's a challenging boundary to be able to express your religious beliefs when you hold office and still respect the non-establishment of religious for others. And maybe even more so when we have kinds of religion who are, really believe that other folks who aren't as a part of that religion are in sin, and label them savages or infidels or such and so forth. So what mechanisms do we have within kind of our government and civic organizations to push back against that, to really establish that boundary?
Fantastic question, Agent Bond. So I have a little bit of a background with this. I'm glad you asked. Thank you. This is almost a ringing endorsement for the chaplain services of our military. So I'm just going to speak on behalf of Navy chaplains, that we were tasked with this extraordinary task of making sure that everyone was represented. So we had, man, it's not just Methodists and Catholics. It wasn't just Christian folk. We had Buddhists. I had Zoroastrian folk. We had pagans, neo-pagans, Wicca. We had all sorts of folks. And then we had some that were called secular humanists that didn't want the religious part, but they wanted space so they could talk about the things that mattered to them as well. So we have a mechanism and we have some precedent set whereby we encourage the expression of this without allowing it to become something that is endorsed. And so really, I would say if you've ever known anyone in the military, contact a chaplain and see how they do that, how they balance that, the ability to, I always represented United Methodist because that was my endorsement, but it was not an establishment of religion because we, as a part of a pluralistic society that values all of its people, were encouraged and in fact charged with ensuring that they had ways to have their faith expressed or their lack of faith, but their complete commitment to their values expressed. And we did that. And so I would just say, just look at the history of military chaplaincy as a way of kind of, as a beacon for how we can do that in terms of mechanisms and actual activity. Did that answer your question? Or ish?
Yeah, so part of it's very pro. I guess I'm also thinking of what happens when that fails and you have somebody really trying to establish that religion. What mechanisms do we have to push back against that?
Oh man. Yeah, that's what the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment is about. And it's also it is the responsibility of the citizen to remind the people who have authority, and it's the people who've been elected, with the information that we have, that these are the rights that we have been guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. That supersedes an individual or a collective of individuals or a political party, by the way, who have no representation in the Constitution. Those were formed after. And so I think we go back to the document, and I think we take it seriously. And people of faith, people of no faith get together in order to honor the greatest goals and desires of this nation and demand it.
All right. We're on ticket number 12 is the next one I picked up. And thank you. And just a reminder, you have one go at your question, and make sure you speak into a mic because the people outside can't hear if we speak without mics.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. We're here, I think, because people are very concerned about censorship, and we should be concerned about censorship. I was concerned when I read the piece in the newspaper and wrote a letter to the editor of the newspaper expressing my concerns, not about the ideas that were presented in the article, but about the placement of the article. It was clearly an opinion piece that should have been in the opinion piece part of the paper, not in the news part. I don't think anybody would want to address that. Thank you.
Michael.
Her opinion. Journalists and editors there is the opinion page, and it's where perspective thoughts on local issues should go. I wrote a lot of editorials advocating various positions. Lori and Evans, my former editor, and I often sat together and we would want to write about this. And so you sort of take off that journalist hat and put on the opinion writer hat. And there is a separation of that. The article in question, was Chloe expressing an opinion about Charlie Kirk, or was she citing information or writing information about Charlie Kirk? I can't speak for her. She's not here, but my understanding is that she had attribution. She was referring to other articles, particularly one in the New York Times, which was talking about his background and his perspective. There is this interesting distinction. If I'm writing an article and I say, Charlie said at a talk, blah, 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 that is an expression of fact, but because he said it, but also what he says is an opinion. So it can get a little tricky in writing about stuff where something is expressed as an opinion, although it's a representation of what somebody said at a public event. Also, people can disagree about what's said in the paper. When I was editor, I expected that. I got pushback. People questioned what I wrote, what my staff wrote. My response would be, okay, I'll step back. I'll look at that and see, okay, do you have a point? I'll double check what was written. I'll make sure we had our facts right. And if there was a feeling that if in doing that, I came to the conclusion like, oh, we made a mistake, or we didn't make that clear, then that article might be republished, or there would be a clarification or a correction in the next paper. But if upon examining what was written, and we felt that we stood by it, then we let it go. But we also said to the person who was objecting to it, write a letter, write a point of view. That's kind of the process of it. And that's how it should work. I'm not sure it worked well in this case.
Thanks, Michael. 3 minutes are up. All right. Peyton, are there any hands raised on Zoom?
Got a question from Kathy Anderson for Pastor Blake.
Kathy Anderson for Pastor Blake.
What do you think is a good way forward if one is even?
Why don't you read it into that?
Yeah, sounds good. What do you think is a good way forward if one is even needed with the division between the more right-wing churches and the more mainstream churches?
So I say this, and I'm not trying to be glib. The churches, Christian churches, historically have always had varying divisions. And the expression of those, how many churches are there in Homer?
I know because I spent 3 years ago or 4 years ago organizing for one of our Pride meetings.
Winter, what was the number again?
There's 32 plus.
32.
32 plus.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think in some ways it's I'm going to treat it kind of nicely and say that good fences make good neighbors. And I think one of the things I have very conservative and very progressive friends, and I'm from Arkansas. I mean, it's a pretty conservative spot. I think the thing is to first, instead of starting with a denomination or with a set of beliefs or a dogma, to see a person as an unrepeatable miracle, to see the worth and value of every person, and then to begin there instead of at our place of disagreement. I mean, we're made up of the same molecules. We all become star stuff after all this again. And we have an opportunity to engage one of the 8 billion truly extraordinary, unique miracles. And if we do that individually, I think it will inform us collectively how then to deal and to treat with each other. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. I'm going to take one of the cards now from someone who had a question but didn't want to speak. Please explain, it's mainly for Michael, I think. Please explain the firewall between the business and the news in a news organization.
Good question. So at newspapers, actually it was even physical at the Homer News back in the Lanning Street office. The newsroom was on the east end, the advertising was on the west end. So what that means is that what we publish in the paper can't be seen as favoring a business, or what the advertiser does can't be seen as favoring the news. So if somebody starts a business, and we wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm glad to see your business in town. We're going to write an article about you because you've advertised in our paper." I mean, that's the firewall. It also goes in the sense that every now and then you would write an article and you knew you're going to offend somebody. It was kind of funny. Michael Maris here in the audience. He's been the cartoonist of the Homer News, I don't know, 45 years. And it was rather odd, the rare times when somebody said, "I'm going to pull my advertising because of," because they didn't like it. It was like they were objecting to a cartoon that Michael Meredith did. He did one about a gravel pit operator and it was like the zombie hand coming out and it was just kept coming. And that gravel pit operator also had an Anchor Point real estate company. And this guy came in and I'm the boy. And I was like, we give a lot of latitude to Michael because he's a really good cartoonist and that's his job. And it's on the opinion page. So, we had to be careful. So that's the separation is you make decisions in the newsroom that can't favor advertising, that you don't think about, you recognize the advertising is there, but it's not going to influence you, change what you write. And sometimes you also have to accept that it's going to lose you advertisers. But that's the thing. I will also say in that context, there is a separation that journalists attempt to be ethical. So I am nonpartisan. Now I was nonpartisan when I worked for the paper. I am not a Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, anything. And that's an ethic that journalists generally do, is they try to avoid conflicts of interest.
Thank you. So our next ticket is number 18. So maybe the mic can start making its way to the back there. It does seem to me that we're not going to make it through all the tickets. So if there's any ministers or journalists or politicians who might want to say something, just raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic for after number 18 here.
This is it's a big one, I think. Well, they're all big, but honoring each other as individuals, being respectful of each other. That's an essential thing that we can all do locally, and to build and maintain community, and to help also to combat the divisiveness and kind of overwhelming sense of despair. If you know anything about that. And Michael, you had mentioned that governments can't censor news, but we are witnessing illegal things every single day. And I wonder about the checks on those activities and what we can do. What we can do locally, what we can do to support efforts. They're donating to certain civil ACLU. You can make donations and stuff, but it feels like I think I said it. Anything that can actually stop the illegal actions of our government.
That's for Michael, I think, right?
So what do we do when that happens? Well, I mean, if a government official does something that you feel is suppressing the speech and they run for office, you can vote. You can exercise your power through your vote. I mean, that can be an issue. You know, I didn't like what you did. I'm not going to vote for you. That's one check in the system. We are in a position in America which I think and I believe we're approaching the illiberalism of something like Hungary. Orban's Hungary. Orban has suppressed the press, and he didn't do it by burning down buildings. He just little subtle moves until all of a sudden there is not much of a free press in Hungary. So you create alternative presses. I mean, that's interesting. And also in Hungary, there's a YouTube channel that is a anti-government press. That's one thing that's going on. You can support alternative voices, alternative media, people who are dissenting, who are challenging suppression of free speech. The other thing is, I would say, be not afraid. These are hard times, I believe, and it's a time for courage. I have a nephew. My niece is married to a Norwegian and lives in Norway. And Øystein's grandfather was in the Norwegian resistance. And when I think of courage in these political times, I think of his grandfather and how he fought the Nazi occupation and almost got caught. But I also think of what the Norwegians do. It's like, we don't brag about that. So I don't know. I just be strong, be mindful, be aware, and don't be afraid.
Yeah, there's also a meaningful analog. I think what you described is how do you use the system and the levers of power when you feel like the levers of power aren't available to you. So if we look at the founding of our own nation, we see that people got together. I mean, if you look at our founding documents, I mean, the context of their gathering at risk of their own life was this higher calling. And I think part of it is just coming together and continuing every day to take a deep breath and to do the best we can with the day that we have, with the things in front of us, keeping our compasses in our hand, knowing which direction is north, and then looking to those analogs that we have. I mean, the founding of our own nation is bathed in that language, in those frustrations, in that sense of hopelessness. And so as a person who lives in a community with you, I want to encourage you to continue to get up and be the best you can be, because you add something amazing to this community. And the stronger we are individually, the stronger we are as small communities, the stronger we'll be as a nation. And I think that's a ground up kind of thing, which is what we're supposed to be about, right? And so let's look to our analogs, let's look to our history, let's look to the ways that has been done before, so that we can then move forward with the best intentions, but also with the definitive actions. I think it has to be made there.
All right. Ticket number 6 is next.
That's me. I just want to say thank you to the panel. You guys have done a great job here, and it's really, yeah, good. Some of the things that I love that have come out is the way that we treat one another. The honor and the respect and the love has to be there. Otherwise, the community breaks down. And I think one of the things that really show up that we don't really see right away in the separation of church and state and the Constitution, that it was written in a way that really honors your choice. And so, you know, God made us all amazing people, very beautiful, very glorious people with intrinsic value that we all want to see in one another. And it's the most fun calling out the gold in one another. And if we focus on that, it will really help, even though we have very philosophical differences. Can I have at least another minute or two? I'm a minister, so.
Oh, he's a minister. Okay. You
Yeah,
get 2 more minutes.
No, we got
I've-
all.
You want to say who you are?
I've never in my life pulled that card. So,
That's right.
but so anyway, I wanted to just say I really appreciate that. I think one of the misnomers, though, about separation of church and state is that we think it's in our Constitution, and it's not. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in the Declaration of Independence. It's not even in any of the Federalist Papers that we're actually deliberating and debating, and all the discussion they have. It's not in there. And so if any of you heard me on the radio before, I actually offered $1,000 to anybody, and I would offer that now to anybody who can actually show me that separation of church and state is in any of our founding documents. It's not there. Where it came is 13 years later in a letter. It was a personal letter to the Dansbury Baptist Church. They were worried that the government was going to force on them a religion. And that's the context of when Jefferson said the separation of church and state. When he used that phrase, it was specifically so telling that church, no, the government is not going to make you be a certain denomination. And that was the context of all that. I think what is really important is that because none of us want to be forced, right? I don't want to be forced. None of us want to be forced. We want an invite. So that's why we have freedom of press and freedom of speech and we have that because now we can have dialogue, and now we can invite people into the discussions, and then you can make up your own mind. God gave us all volition, the ability to choose, and we can choose to do good or we can choose to not do good. We could choose whatever, but what is honorable in our Bill of Rights is that we actually have the ability to choose. And so I just want to say that, and having that choice and having an invite instead of a force, both ways. We don't want the government forcing us, and we don't want one another forcing each other. No matter if you believe differently or not, force is what we don't love.
Thank you for that perspective. Anyone on the panel want to? Thank you.
Real quick, the phrase that Jefferson used there was a wall of separation, which I think is important, and it also influenced. You won't find a lot of things mentioned specifically by name in certain words in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or the things that followed. The various amendments that came after the first 10. I do agree with you. I think it's all, but it is very, very important to acknowledge that just because the thing is spoken in that phrase, it's been upheld by jurisprudence in 1947, certainly is there, but
there's more court cases after that.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I reviewed 60 of them. Yeah. And so the important piece is that there are a lot of things that are assumed, and there are a lot of things that we count as our rights that aren't mentioned specifically in that document. And I mean, the elastic clause covers some of that, but the separation really was in order to guarantee, and I think you mentioned it, I agree with you 100% on that. We do have the right to choose, which is why the government shouldn't respect and establishment of religion, which is the actual language of the First Amendment. Yeah.
Thanks. Any other panelists? No. Peyton, anybody, any hands raised on Zoom? Okay, good. So our next ticket is number 9. 009. Going. I don't see any hands. All right. Let's move on to ticket number 3. Maybe we will get through them all. All right. Ticket 16. Ticket 016. There's a pass. All right. We're going to do it. 15. Ticket number 15. Yes, sir. We're bringing you the mic right now.
Both out there. Here you
Okay, I want to say, we the people, of the people, by the people, for the people. We all have that right. We all need to review what happened in May 6th, 1933. The biggest purge of books in the world happened then. 1933, Berlin. So let's revisit all that. Everyone needs to revisit that and have a conversation with our kids and our grandkids about this. This is happening to us right now. We need to look at this real hard. Thank you.
Any comments? Yeah, Michael? Thank you, sir.
That was in Nazi Germany, right?
Yes, sir.
And for sort of personal anecdote, on my great grandmother's side, Johanna Jander was born in Germany, emigrated, and her family, her sister's family stayed behind in Germany. And my cousin Renata was alive during Nazi Germany. She saw that. And when I was 17, my dad, my older sister, and I went and visited her in Bremen. And this was about 1973, yeah. And had one of those conversations like, how did this ever happen? How did this happen? How did, because, I, as part German American, felt some collective guilt about what happened there. And every German feels that. And so I had this conversation with Renata, and she said, I don't know how it happened. She said her mother would, say, where are all these people going? No, you can't question it. You can't ask. You don't talk about that. And Renata said to me, we can't ever let this happen. We have to stand up. We have to be careful. We can't let this horror happen ever again. And that was somebody who lived through it telling me that. And so I remember that and think of that. I hope we're not slouching toward this now, but I think we need to be aware, and I agree with you there. And, thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Ticket number 2002. Any hands?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, here we are. Perfect. The mic is on its way to you.
We think alike, so.
Oh, pass. Okay.
All I have to say is pretty simple. I've traveled all over Alaska this summer. I went to the Alaska State Fair. No problems, no issues, no hate, no diversity. Everybody there was from all over the world. We all get along. I was kind of shocked. I'm kind of an older person, and younger people would get out of my way and say, excuse me, and they would, can we help you, ma'am? People would have empty chairs at their table. The place was packed. It was the most numbers that had ever been seen in the state before. And people would say, oh, here, come down and sit here and sit with us. I sat with everybody, old people, young people, people from foreign nations. And we were just getting out of each other's way. We were enjoying everything. We were enjoying the food. No politics at all. Nobody's just talking about it. We just want to be regular people, and we want to be quit telling what to do, and the government every second telling us what to do about everything. We don't want it anymore. We want to reach out to each other. We want to band together, and I've come to the conclusion from all of this and traveling in Anchorage as well, where my grandkids are in college in Anchorage, and my family is there. I've been all over, and all the people I talk to just say to me the same thing. If you left us all alone and didn't bother us, we could figure this out by ourselves. And let's rally for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that perspective. Any takers on the panel, or should we move on to the next question? Marcia?
Well, I'll just share one of the things I really love. I love watching the Olympics. And in the Parade of Nations, when the U.S. comes through, I'm going to choke up now. I'm so proud of the U.S. When you look the other countries, lots of homogeneity. You know, everybody looks very similar, and then here comes the U.S. And so our pluralism, our diversity, our differences truly are our strength and truly are our identity. There was a sign at the rally today of, 89% of us are immigrants, 2% the Native Americans. We're all from somewhere else. And that's who the U.S. is. That's who the United States of America is.
Thanks, Marcia. Is that a new ticket? All right. So we're on 14 of the old tickets. Ticket number 14. Anybody? All right. How about ticket number 22?
So I feel like there's an additional elephant in the room that I haven't heard addressed yet, and that is the incredible concentration in this era we're living in of wealth and power. There was recently, just a couple hours ago, there was a No Kings protest. But even during the era of the divine rights of king, they didn't have as a radical a gradient between the most elite and the working class poor of the world. And I feel like so much, and I'm not alone in thinking this, but it's something that I strongly feel, is that part of the media cycle that we live in these days is based on intentional informed outrage, trying to, like breaking us into camps. What that woman just said, it was so perfect. When we are together and in these kind of contexts, one-on-one social, we don't really see these divides, whereas the national kind of story is that we are super divided, and that, if you're a conservative Republican or if you're a liberal Democrat, you're the enemy. And that may be true in some situations. There's certainly, big divisions in those worldviews. But I think that one of the things that needs to be really analyzed and hopefully, ideally dismantled is this incredible imbalance between the very wealthy, powerful oligarchs that are really, they're going by the playbook. There's two playbooks for destroying a country, and that is a revolution, or to do it this system we're seeing right now, where the judges are replaced with judges that are friendly. Yes,
thanks. Appreciate that input. Any comments on the panel, Michael?
One of the things you see in that is what's called corporate journalism, where more and more multinational large corporations are absorbing the Homer News. I mean, Homer News was bought by a multinational corporation in 2000. It had been previously owned by a group of Washington Post editors, which were and then it was Gatehouse, and then it was Sound Publishing, and then it was Carpenter Media. So that's something of concern and who they're not answering necessarily to their local communities, they're answering to their shareholders. Carpenter Media has a hedge fund. So, at the end of the day, it's how much money can we make for the hedge fund, not are we reporting the news responsibly and thoroughly. One thing, that you get into discussions of, socialism, even communism, but, Marxism, what should the balance be between the rich and the poor? But the thing I think that if I were very wealthy, I would have to, there's kind of a social compact, people can accept extreme wealth. They can accept that, the Elon Musk, they can accept that people have come into the Bay with $150 million yachts and $30 million jets and spend a lot of money. But if needs aren't being met, if people are not getting good health care, if they're not getting good education, it may not go well for the rich. And I don't, I think I think there should be a social compact that you take care of your people as well as you take care of your wealthy.
Thanks, Michael. So moving on to ticket number 8. Is that you? All right, here's the mic.
Need it.
Katie Dawson. My view of Christian nationalism is Christian is good and nationalism is good, but the way they're meshing into one thing and where the ultra powerful are using it, I think they're trying to steer this country into fascism. So any comments anybody wants to make?
Blake?
So just from the Christian perspective, Jesus said that no one can serve two masters. You're going to love one and hate the other. And anytime you try to hyphenate people of faith of any background, and you can look at the history on that, it's not great because you overlay a system that was not meant to be enmeshed with another system. And it can create a lot of different permutations. I mean, fascism has certainly arisen out of that. Theocracy, totalitarianism has been something that has expressed itself throughout history. And it's not unique to Christianity, by the way, but since we are talking about Christian nationalism, yeah, that's the tough piece. It's, to be patriotic and to believe in your country and to love where you're from is great. To be a person of faith, for the Christian perspective is great. When those two things get together, one of them has to take priority. And I think that's part of the big conflict is that in this sense, the faith is being used as a lever to mobilize and pull people into different spaces and creating voting blocks. This is not new. This is something that happened with the establishment of the religious right in 1990 and 92 when the Republicans took the House of Representatives for the first time since FDR. So that's nothing new. And that's where Christian nationalism, it becomes pernicious because it uses faith as a way to leverage people. And in that way, then you're not really serving the faith or the nation. It's this other thing that's happening. And so that's why it is important to keep these things separated and so that one doesn't become slave to the other, to use an insensitive term.
Thank you. So we only have 2 tickets left, maybe 3, because there's one that I'm pretty sure I asked already. We're going to check. So if you have a deep thought or a question, don't hesitate to put your hand up and get a ticket, and they'll bring it to me, and we'll talk to you next. But right now we're on number 5, 005. Any takers for 5? Is there a 5 in the house? Maybe not. So how about number 4? Ticket number 4. Oh, there's one there.
Hi, Ben Johnson. Didn't come with a question, but I'm really impressed with your panelists. I always like somebody that is really educated in each one of your fields. And so through that process, I do have a question for Blake, and it goes like this. I was impressed with your history of King Henry VIII and how he sort of nationalized the Catholic Church in England. It's fascinating that some very good moral religious leaders came out of that church in spite of that. But I wonder if you have some more examples of countries that had a national religion that led to things not going so good. Or do you have any examples of countries that have a national religion or had a national religion that actually worked out pretty well? And I'm saying that in reflective of, as I'm sitting here thinking, I thought of 2. Germany, of course, had wonderful people in both the Lutheran Church and in the Catholic Church, and yet they totally failed to stop Nazism. And I look back, my father was both Lutheran and Swedish, which was natural. But Sweden had a law. You had to be Lutheran to be a good Swede, or I believe it was up until probably 1980 or something like that, not that long ago. So do you have any more examples that we could bear on? Because history is wonderful for examples.
Thanks, Brent. In case anybody wondered, I did give him a few extra seconds only because he's a borough assemblyman. All right.
There you go. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for giving me another opportunity to nerd out about history. No, so what I would do, and I'm a person who believes in cleaning my own house. And so when I want to talk about the negative examples of when religion has aligned and created problems, I mean, it's not just in the official. I mean, at the same time, France said, mon Dieu et mon droit, so my God and my right. It's the right to rule over, and that's really being used in a lot of different places. The thing that I like to draw attention to is the fact that in almost every country that has had substantial kind of religious input, you have the creation of schools. I'm very, very proud that in the United States that Methodists were involved in creating hospitals and schools, Catholics, hospitals and schools. You have people of conscience, of faith, of a variety of faiths, by the way. When you look at the greatest libraries to ever exist, those haven't traditionally been Christian libraries. Some of our Muslim cousins have had extraordinary libraries that advance science, and it's just the best thing in the world. And so there have been a lot of places. I can't remember when you've had one where you had an enmeshed religion with the government, because it almost always ends in soldiery, where the economic levers and the levers that control the military are involved in things like, say, the 11 odd crusades that were conducted. So it's hard to point to, and I think that's the point, though, right? That when there is a healthy separation, and this is what the Founding Fathers understood, that when you do have the ability to make the choice without an official sanctioned government religion, then you create people who can be their very best in the spaces they believe most deeply without having to influence things like military occupations or decide economic doctrines that will drastically affect people that have nothing whatsoever to do with your faith. And so that's kind of where I'd go with that. Historically, it's pretty tough. I mean, if someone has one where they're like, oh yeah, this theocracy just rocked out, then I want to put you in contact with all my history professors. Because I don't know if they know about, but I will say that people of faith, a variety of faiths, and this does make me proud, have been involved with the poor, with the dispossessed, with those who've been cast out, with those who've been told they had no worth or no status. They've been responsible for ending conflict and ending occupation peacefully. And so I do like to hold those things up. However, those are not positions of a government and policy. Those are positions of people of deep conscience. And so that's usually what I end up lifting up. I don't think that answers your question directly, but that's the best I can do.
Thank you. Michael?
Take you up on that. The United Kingdom has a state church, right? And the Anglican Church, and is King Charles is he the head of the? Yeah,
still.
So you have this modern democratic state that has a state church. It didn't do so well in the past, we know, but it's interesting. I mean, I don't think that should be.
An audience member is saying it's separate. It's separated from the government. It's not enmeshed.
Right. But I mean, you do have a modern democratic system which has a state church. They have. It's interesting how has the United Kingdom grown, where they have become, I think, through political necessity. I think because of centuries of strife and trouble, that they have come to recognize that, while the Anglican Church is the state church, they are tolerant and respectful of other religions, and those religions can coexist. But that's an interesting case. So how do they do it? Maybe they're not doing it very well. I don't know.
All right, thank you. So ticket number 21, it's a new one. It wasn't in the original bucket.
I would just like to make a comment. I heard someone earlier with a question say that Chloe's story was not objective and that it was an opinion piece that should have been on the opinion page. I read that story and I didn't feel that way at all. My opinion is that it was objective journalism. The 2 points that I read in the paper that were raised specifically about the story had to do with calling Charlie Kirk an icon of Christian nationalism, which I believe he was. And as I recall, something about pushing conspiracy theories, which he most certainly did. I do not idolize Charlie Kirk. I don't think anybody should be called to the mat for refusing to support a misogynist, bigot. I
Thank
could
you.
go on and
If I
on.
could just say that we do have ground rules that require us to be
Okay.
respectful and civil. Thank you, Judith. Any comments from the panel? Okay, so moving on to question number 23.
So I'm very appreciative of this forum. It's reminded me of the discussion of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and things. It's reminded me very much of the values that bind us all together as Americans. My question has to do, and it's primarily for the two members of the United Methodist Church, is school vouchers. And one of my concerns is that school vouchers are taking my money, my taxpayer money, my permanent fund money, or whatever, and giving it to entities that are not the public school system. My experience has been that I learned the values that bind us as Americans. I learned in the public school system. 8th grade, I had to memorize the preamble to the Constitution. 12th grade, government class, learned about civics, learned how the three branches of government hold each other accountable and things. So my question is do you feel, and you mentioned, as you discussed the Reverend or Pastor Lockhart, is that your name?
Langston.
Excuse me, Langston, I'm sorry. You mentioned the two values, the American values and the Christian values that hold us together. And the American values, though, I fear that with the school vouchers, that we may lose those as people choose to send their children not to the public school system, but to other schools. So can you speak to your, do you have that similar concern? Do you worry that school vouchers will erode the American values that bind us together?
Let's go. So yeah, make sure you hold the yellow card and the red card up. So I'm married to a public school teacher. My mom served was the superintendent of the school board in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I served also in those capacities. I'm a public school kid. I'm gonna come at this from two zones, if you'll allow it. I have two vectors on this. One of these is that as members of as a society who pays taxes, and as a person who pays taxes, that I acknowledge that there are going to be things that my tax dollars go to support other members of my community that may not necessarily align with my values and priorities. So in 2002, there was a Zalman case before the Supreme Court where they acknowledged that as members of the public, vouchers were okay to do with public money. In the same way, Trinity Lutheran before the Supreme Court, it was decided that because a playground was a public benefit, that they had access to public grants as well. And I think those are important cases. So as a citizen of the country and knowing, I always think my brother was a pilot in the Navy and in the Coast Guard. And some people don't like the objectives of some of our military organizations. But Grant was always very appreciative of the fact that people's taxes pay for gas for his helicopter and for the maintainers and their health care. And so there are going to be things. So personally, I'm a little bit conflicted. I will say that I do think that the numbers on the voucher system, and we just implemented this in Arkansas 2 years ago, that 98.5%, 97 to 98.5% of all the people who receive vouchers were able to pay for their own education, were being reimbursed for education they could afford. Now, what that meant is that hundreds of millions of dollars in Arkansas, I'm not going to speak to Alaska because I don't have those numbers, went away from public schools that were in the Mississippi Delta, which is one of the two poorest regions of our country, and went into the pockets of people who could afford to educate their children. As a pastor of a Christian church, that hurt me. And it's something that I can't personally, I cannot speak on behalf of the United Methodist Church, but I can say that there are those two pieces. So to me, it is I want to support, but as a pastor of a church, it's tough for me to affirm a policy that disproportionately affects those who are already poor. And so I can't advocate that.
Thanks. Anyone else on the panel care to tackle that one?
That reminded me, I for 2 years, my education, I went to a Jesuit high school in Tampa and was educated by Jesuit priests, which, if you've never met a Jesuit priest, is a very stern education. But the school I went to was, Jesuit was considered an elite prep school in Tampa, and it was where you sent your sons, because it was at that time just boys, to get the best education they could. And I think that was the only school I went to where I would ride my bike to school, and I get passed regularly by my fellow students driving by in Mercedes and BMWs. And there was one kid whose chauffeur dropped him off in a Rolls Royce. So there was a lot of money. There were also poor kids who got scholarships and stuff. So I think your point is valid that in some schools people can afford it and afford it easily.
Thank you. And Blake, go ahead. Maybe Marcia will say it.
I just wanted to say that I think one of the issues that we experience is the fragmentation of education, of information. We don't have a common body of knowledge that we're passing along. And I think public schools have represented that common body of knowledge in society, and I think that's a loss. We also don't have just Walter Cronkite giving us the news. So I think that we've lost some cohesion there because of that.
Thanks. Yeah, and even though I'm the moderator, I'll just share with Blake, as a newcomer to Alaska, that however we might feel about it, in Alaska, our constitution prohibits the state government from giving money to state taxpayer money directly to private schools. And there's a court case pending as to whether giving it to parents to give to the school is direct or not. I believe that I've called all the tickets, but I might be wrong. So if you had a ticket and I didn't call you, please raise your hand. Yes. And then I do have one more card to read.
I'm number 7.
Okay.
I guess it's not a question, but I did want to comment.
Just wait for the mic so the people outside can hear. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm number 7. And I wanted to go back to the question of countries that are one religion, basically, and that the church and state is not separated. We visited Bhutan a few years ago. It's a Buddhist country. It's almost exclusively a Buddhist country. Every state and the national government, the building that houses the local government is shared with a Buddhist monks that live there. And all the decisions that are made in the equivalent of their legislature is also passed by the monks to see if it's consistent with the country, with their values. And it's a beautiful country, and it's a very welcoming country. So it's possible that it could be interchanged. They could be intermixed. I mean, church and state.
Interesting. Yeah. They have a similar concept in Iran, but it doesn't go as well there, I think. So our last question so far, it seems like a very good one to end on, unless there's more, is multifaceted. It says, when mainstream media is corrupted and or fails, what makes an effective alternative media? Who should it reach and how? And what needs to be communicated to the people the most through that alternative means? Michael. So, when mainstream media fails, what makes effective alternative media? So what is it, an effective one? Who should it reach and how should it reach them? And what needs to be communicated to the people most urgently?
I hope it's not failing, but I will admit that it's damaged. The wonders of both our country and our technology is that there are alternative forms of communication. I mean, the web has been remarkable, and so far, there's been some suppression of it. I mean, through things like Twitter and algorithms which suppress voices, and if somebody gets control of social media platform. But for every, social media platform that gets limited, another one pops up. So the technology, I think, will allow those other voices, those other medias, in all sorts of ways. And some of those are extremely propagandistic. I mean, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with somebody, there's nothing wrong with Must Read Alaska, John Faulkner, Suzanne Downing. It's highly political, it's highly opinionated. Go forth, that's their right. So I think there can be alternate media, it can be all sorts of platforms. It could even be old school press, printed paper. And then what the last part of that I was
what topics or what needs to be communicated to the people the most?
Well, first of all, I mean, what needs to be communicated is the community. The great sadness I had in the last years working for the Homer News was that we could not cover every story. And also they wouldn't hear about stories. People say, why didn't you cover this? And I would say, because you didn't send me that information. You put it up on Facebook, and Facebook is a fire hose. So unless somebody sends a press release or a notice or something, you can't find out about it. So we need those community platforms to share our stories, share our successes, share our failures, share our sadness. And I think that's what unites us as a community, is when we can come to know each other and come to know, not the bad stuff, but the good stuff, the successes of our children, our students. Yes.
Obituary, someone said.
I mean, sharing the lives of people who live here, grew up here, and contributed to community. They're just remarkable, beautiful people. So, thanks.
All right. Any last thoughts before Carly comes up to close this thing out? Any hands? I see there's one more person. Maybe they've spoken before, but this is a really deep one, so we're going to do it. I can tell. And I'll hand off to you.
Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to say, as a former journalist, that I found that one of our most important tasks that hasn't been mentioned yet is to suppress or verify rumors. We would sometimes get these calls and somebody would say, oh, I heard such and such. And nowadays, social media is just filled with all kinds of crazy rumors. And we need real journalists who can dig down and go, hey, this is a hoax, or, oh, we went and looked into this and here's what we found. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And over to Carly now.
Wow, that was a really, really incredible discussion. Thank you all so much for being here on a sunny Saturday afternoon. And I really, really am so grateful to Jason for taking on this tricky conversation with Grace. And to our incredible panelists, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Blake. Yeah, and there's a lot you can do, right? You can sign up to stay informed. You can donate to things you believe in. You can talk to our neighbors. We can continue this dialogue with each other. And also, I want to thank so many individuals in this room who donated to help us buy pizza, because we thought pizza and Diet Coke were a great unifier. Thank you to all those people who donated. And then we also have some great door prizes that honor our sort of commitment to free speech in Homer. Jason is going to pull some out.
First one, Katie Dawson. There.
Oh my goodness. Katie Dawson, this is a gift of a year membership to KBBI. So thank you. More.
Right, here we go again. This one is Ginger Bryant. Oh, Ginger.
Is Ginger here? Okay. Uh-oh.
It must be present.
I think must be present to win, right? We stuck it out. We should win.
Yeah. So people in rooms.
Yes. Yeah.
There may be a few here then.
Okay.
That. Savannah Shell? Savannah Shell, maybe. Shell.
Savannah? Is anyone named Savannah? Okay.
Okay, let's try again. Layla Wojtarski.
Leela. Is Leela here? Uh-oh.
Oh, these are
You know,
these are Porcupine Theater gift cards.
Oh. Harriet.
Leela's behind.
Oh,
Harriet.
yeah. Leela. There's a set of two in there. In there, yeah. No, in there. We have one more. Again, thank you to the generous donors who helped us host this event today.
Is that Dwayne Johnson maybe, or Dwayne Hanson? Oh, I know Dwayne Hanson. I bet he left.
Uh-oh. Gosh. Dig deep.
Okay.
Adrian? Yeah. She's here. There's two more. These are 2 gift cards to the Homer bookstore.
James. Donna.
Last 4 digits 2206. Woohoo!
No? James?
No.
Doma. Yeah, Doma.
This is a gift card to the Homer bookstore.
Oh, this had to be a fix. This is Paul Seaton.
Oh. All right. There's lots of things to sign up for if you want to stay informed or get involved in events like this where we can create dialogue. Sign up for on the front entrance table for the House District 6 group. Yeah, and then also one quick shout out. ACLU is here also. The ACLU is a great organization. They also often make me really uncomfortable because they defend things that make me uncomfortable because free speech applies to all of us and all of our beliefs. And so thanks to the ACLU and Megan. If you want to chat with her, find her back there. I think that's it, right? Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Good. Good.
No. Oh, look at that. Okay, great.
Oh my God.